Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this event hosted by the MIT Club of Northern California. My name is Afsana Akhtar, and I'm a co-chair of the Healthcare Forum of the club. I hope everybody's staying safe and doing well, and that you've been, it's the end of the day, hopefully for you. And so this is a really nice topic for the end of the day. Help you maybe put away some of your stress for the day and things like that. But today I'm really excited to introduce our topic and our speaker. So our topic today is meditation for mental agility to navigate life's transitions. And one of the reasons we chose this topic, not surprisingly, is that given COVID, the past 18 months or so have been a time of many surprises, many changes, hardships for a lot of people. And so many of us, almost all of us, have been going through a lot of transitions, be it just situational, personal, professional, spiritual. And we have to navigate these changes and hopefully emerge better. So that's what today's topic is. And I'm very excited to introduce our speaker today, whom I've actually known for a number of years. So it's also a personal pleasure to introduce and share Sheena's work with you. I'll share just a short background of Sheena, and then Sheena will share a little bit more about her journey in detail. And then just before we dive in, actually, Sheena will give her talk. If you have questions, if you can just type them into the chat, what we will do is at a midpoint in the discussion, and then again at the end, we'll have an opportunity, Sheena will have an opportunity to address some of your questions. So with that, I'll introduce Sheena. Sheena is trained as a clinical psychologist, educator, and pastoral counselor. Her work and learning span 4 continents and 20 plus years of experience with clients in many sectors, including healthcare, business, education, entertainment, and sports. Sheena's expertise lies in using psychoeducative techniques followed by targeted mental recon to elicit profound and lasting shifts in cognition and behavior to thrive. So with that, I will hand it over to Sheena. Welcome, Sheena.
Thank you, Asana. It's really my pleasure to be hosted by you and by MIT and to have such a wonderful response. Thank you for taking time out in your afternoon to be with us. And I hope this makes a positive impact in your life after hearing a little bit more and maybe enjoying some practice at the end. I'll be happy to answer questions as we go. Sana mentioned there will be 2 points where we'll be doing that. To start with, I'm just going to pop into a PowerPoint. And we're going to share some of my info. So here we go. All right. So as mentioned, our topic is about mental agility and the difficulty in navigating life's transitions. So I wanted to start off a little bit about my background, most of which was around clinical psychology, and I trained that as my core training, and that was done in South Africa. And I had the great privilege of working at some of the biggest hospitals in sub-Saharan Africa, and the caseload was so varied, and I had the opportunity to see quite a lot of unusual cases, and I'm so thankful for that experience. Later, I moved into the area of education and counseling, and that took me to quite a few countries, and most of which was spent in Korea. And while in Korea, I also expanded into a meditation training, which was an 8-month training in Mount Geryosan. That led to 2 years further training and interning, both in Argentina and the US. All of this culminated in about 8 years of developing this current method, which we've adapted and developed, being my husband and I, into the psychoeducative meditation method. So this is a little bit of how it developed. I might touch on more of the details of that later in my personal example, but this is just the basic background for now. And why we're here today. So what we were looking at is, and this has been a need that I've expressed before about the pandemic. Personally, I felt that a lot of people needed support, and we started a group towards the beginning of the pandemic, and it's lasted about 18 months. And there were so many benefits seen in that group as we continued almost, I think, till last month. So it's about a year and a half that we were in that group. And what we found was an incredible need for a reset, because this isolation has given us this time to reflect. I think we've all had this opportunity to realize there's so much more that we want out of life. And that's resulted in this need for a reset. How we get there is the difficulty. And we've also had work transitions, changes of work from office to home. And even for those where this kind of pandemic and lockdown has resulted in almost an optimization of certain living circumstance, there's still a need to coalesce and make that a more permanent shift. So how do we do that? In the meditation that we use, we found that all these needs show up in different forms. And sometimes we don't know that we need the reset or the transition or the optimization, but we do experience some of these reported effects. What I hear a lot is the feelings of a lack of motivation, a decrease in enjoyment or achievement. Even when some goals have been reached, it seems that people don't have that enduring sense of accomplishment. And that was reported from quite a few people that I was working with. Also, one of the most commonly described problems now at work, given the remote working conditions, is ineffective communication. Dealing with people through the internet or just online via Zoom creates a lot of miscommunication and lost opportunities. So how do we increase that? We work through a lot of techniques, and some of those we mention later. Most of all, people reported a disconnection across all age groups. And I think we all can attest to this lack of social contact and what that creates for us in terms of crises. Also moving on to sleep, digestion, fatigue, and also most importantly, decreased immunity from a lot of these above mentioned situations. Pain, mostly back pain, increased irritability, and increased reactivity. But I think the final one is what struck me the most. And this was highlighted even yesterday when I was speaking to a group of friends, that a lot of us we go through our day, we talk, we laugh, we come home and we end up in this state of not having the motivation to do much more except to just wait till we go to bed. There's just a very, very deep sense of disconnect. And that's what we term a function of high functioning depression. And I think a lot of people don't even know this is occurring. So in light of these reported effects, we're going to take a look at some of the methods that we use. And being meditation, we're looking at two paths. The first one we're looking at is called the deep path. And the second one is referred to as the wide path. The deep path involves what I would use as a larger scale goal that we're looking at. And that is evolving ourselves to a higher level of consciousness and energy. And the second path is looking at our daily stresses and how we release that in immediate time. And both these paths are what we address. So it's offered, and to what extent you'd want to practice them, these are the two that are available. What they look like in greater detail, if I were to describe the deeper path, which is this evolution of consciousness, we have 7 levels in the meditation method that we learned. And I'm just going to discuss the first 4, given the time that we have. The first level is, if we look at the structure of the mind, we're letting go at the level of thoughts. And this is reflecting over our life and releasing remembered thoughts. So as we release that first level, we have great release and flexibility, and there's great change elicited just from the first level, a lot of relief. As we progress, we go into the second level where we're releasing emotional content, and a lot of that is centered around our relationships. And for each of these levels, we have a specific technique. And the third one is looking at the level of habit and the body. And the last level involves action meditation and releasing around activities. So this is just a very basic description of the deeper level of the meditation. And as I said, each one has its own toolkit and method and strategy and technique. And we guide you through each one. And once you learn the techniques, they're yours to use at your will. And whenever these situations come up, either in thought, in emotion, or habit, you have your toolkit to use. Secondly, we're looking at that more daily release. And the term we coined was clearing the baggage. And here we have the idea that over our lifetimes, we've collected a lot of data that we carry around. And a lot of times we act from this data, and unknowingly we influence the results. So to optimize our actions, we would want to at least be able to clear a lot of that obstacle or noise, however we refer to it. There's a need to be able to clear it so that we act in the moment in a very appropriate and optimized way. So how do we go about that? The first thing we do in the session is what I refer to as targeted mental recon. And here we go over what we find to be the cause of the stresses or events in life or things you're experiencing that are causing these stress effects. And once we've identified the blocks, we're able to process them through the meditation. And this is a letting go style of meditation. And as we let go of all the noise and the obstacles in the mind, we eventually achieve that quiet space. And from that quiet space is where we make the better decisions and we act appropriately from there. So this is what that wide path would look like. And as I said, we're doing both as we go through it. So here, as I found in practice, this is what the meditation release results in. We have an increased flow state and creativity. We have improved health and immunity, increased efficiency both at work and in our personal lives. And it leads to a very much a growth mindset. And I know this is a big buzz term right now, but to see the effects of not being afraid to make mistakes or move forward, even though we've overcome a lot of obstacles, really allows us to grow in our future actions. More importantly, I think most people report feeling more authentic and connected. And communication is becoming more effective, stronger focus and energy, and just a heightened sense of joy in life. So these are the results that were reported thus far, and it can be yours if this practice is followed. Before we move on, I think Afsana would this be a good time for questions?
Sure, we can. And so I will invite folks to enter your questions in the chat. And maybe I can just kick us off with a question, which is, Sheena, you know, meditation is so talked about, and I think a lot of people are kind of very much bought into the benefits of meditation because we've been really learning about it. We hear about it all around us. So I want to kind of put out two questions. One is really your method of meditation. I think you spoke a lot about the benefits, but you know, how is it really working with the mind and body? How is it coming to work in our mind and body? And the second is, how is it different? Because from, say, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which is more of a psychology practice, because a lot of those symptoms you described, if somebody has depression, anxiety, they would go to a psychologist, and at least prior to meds, they might get meds and CBT, or just start with CBT, even sleep issues. So I think it would be, those are some of the things I wondered early on as I was, you know, as I was starting this practice with you. So, and then I will, after that, I'll be happy to read a couple of questions that are coming in.
Okay. We're looking at the first one, which is how does it connect to mind and body? We're looking at meditation, and the point of the meditation we learn is to influence our consciousness and our energy. And consciousness is referred to as the mind, and energy is referred to as the body. So as we go through life, we store up all that data. And with the accumulation of that data, whether positive or negative, it causes blocks in our energy system, which results eventually in disease. But most importantly, we experience it as stress. And whatever form of stress that is, there's a problem in our conscious experience of that and in our energetic experience of that. So the meditation serves to release the blocks in our mental state, in our consciousness. And we do that through a specific technique of letting go. And as we release it in consciousness, it affects the well-being of our energy system and our body. And so there's an overall healing, both mentally and physically. And that results in this whole healing of the mind-body connection. Does that answer the first question?
Absolutely. And in fact, it reminded me of two examples from myself, which is through working with Sheena. I've had the opportunity to work with Sheena for 4 years now. And what I've learned about myself, again, this mind-body connection is, for example, when I've learned now I'm very sensitive to where I have pain in my body. And when I have pain on my neck, I now know that it's because of burden. Whereas if I have pain between my shoulder blades, I know that it's because of interpersonal issues. So based on that, I'm now more sensitive to those things, and I can catch those issues. And then I do some of the processes that help me either help myself feel less burdened or just process some of these interpersonal issues. So thank you. I actually just remembered that myself. There's one question that came in, I think, which is very good, which is, the question is from Sharon. Is this type of meditation the same or different from mindfulness?
Yes. So in addressing that, there are so many types of meditation available. And I think mindfulness has become one of the more popular and well-known types. And I think very simplistically, if we had to divide meditation, there's focus meditation, which is seeking to quiet the mind. And mindfulness is very much the first type, which is seeking the quiet mind. The type that we're looking at is more active meditation. And what we're doing is removing the obstacles to that quiet mind. And by nature of releasing and letting go and using the active mind, because a lot of people tell me, oh, I can't quiet my mind. It's impossible for me to meditate. But this process is for that type of person. So we're using the mind and its natural ability to keep thinking, to exhaust itself and let go. And eventually you reach that same destination of a quiet mind. So this meditation is releasing the block to the quiet mind. Mindfulness is focusing on quieting the mind. So this will be the main distinction. So focus meditation versus active meditation. So hopefully that answered Sharon's question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Any other questions for now? And I think it's also fine if folks want to just voice their question rather than type. All right, if not, I guess, Sheena, let's continue and then we may get more questions later.
All right, let's move on. So we're just going to go a little bit more into the results. I think this is a good time to sort of speak about my arc. And early on in therapy, just by the virtue of our client load, we were dealing with like 40 clients a day coming through the public health system. And I was pretty young at the time. And I developed, I think it was an ovarian cyst that ruptured during that time. And I was just fatigued. My fatigue levels were just, I would end up in bed at 6 p.m. after a day at the hospital. And I couldn't understand like why there was such a high toll on my body. And I think that was later understood as this incredible transference from patient and client load. Physically, I didn't have a way to mitigate all the sort of energetic and the kind of load that I was taking through the day. And up until I started the meditation, I didn't realize I still was carrying a lot of that. And I hadn't found a way to release. And so during the meditation, and especially during those 8 months of the program, I was able to really understand how important it is for especially health professionals who take on so much from helping people and not having a way to release. And now I feel so much better in being able to counsel or mentor or coach, because I have a way for myself to clear all of that and move forward and not have it manifest in my own body. So, you know, that was a big question. And I was so glad when I found a method for that. And I think in application, it can have such wide application to people who just take on so much during the day. And at the end of the day, having a way to just release all of that and start all back again fresh. So that for me was really huge in my healing process. The second part of my healing process was around my allergies. I think I was born allergic. From a baby, I had various problems with wheezing and sinusitis and hay fever, and developed into food allergies. And the more I traveled around the world, I would find new allergies that popped up. And it became quite limiting. I became vegetarian for 25 years, and I was really restricted in terms of my food. I was even afraid to go too far from a hospital because I developed on adult asthma at that point. So I always had my pump, and I never knew when it would be triggered. So towards the end of my time in Korea, my health really took a plunge. And my family and friends were all used to me walking around with my EpiPen, my pump, or some sort of antihistamine. I had 2 surgeries to correct, you know, what they thought the deviated septum was causing, or rhinitis. And none of them really brought much or lasting effect. Surprisingly, when I finished the 8-month program, I didn't realize that I was not allergic anymore. Only until I started just eating things and not having an effect. I was like, whoa, I could eat peanuts again. I could eat things that would cause me extreme allergic reactions, but it wasn't conscious. I didn't know during that period that I had overcome this situation. And now it's almost a joke with my family when I visit them. They still cook and prepare foods to avoid all my allergens. And I'm like, I'm good. I don't need to worry about that anymore. So it was such a transformative and healing part of the journey. So personally, I can really attest to how much this meditation method impacted my healing. And I wish that for anyone in my position. I mean, having gone through surgery, having this really tiny little food world that I could enjoy, this has really opened up my life in so many ways. And this is just 2 points that I can refer to. And there's so much more. But I know we're limited to time. So at this point, I'm going to ask my husband to speak on what actually got us into the meditation and his personal journey through this. So I'm going to hand over to Ben.
All right. Well, hello, my name is Ben. I'm Sheena's husband. And yeah, as she was saying, what originally got us into this this method, I'm more of just from a practitioner standpoint. What got us into it? I was bleeding heavily. I was bleeding to the point where I had 4.6 hemoglobin level. At the time, I didn't understand what that was until I got to the doctor and they explained to me that my my hemoglobin level was 1.6 above a corpse. So it was pretty scary. At that time, I was searching for answers. I was doing things medically. I went to the top level facilities in Korea, and only one physician communicated something that had impact, and that was, I need to change my habit. And I didn't understand at that time what he was referring to. I thought he was talking about behavior or exercise or something external. Later on, I discovered it was my internal habit. It was the habit of my thought. And the reason I practice this method so diligently is because after a week, I noticed immediate results. My bleeding stopped. I started to notice, better effects in my interpersonal relationships, of feeling of being lighter, of unburdening myself. And at that point, we both decided to practice it in earnest, to kind of find out everything that was going on. The presentation of it was so simple that when I caught it, it was the joy I felt about it. It was like feeling like a kid again. The way I would describe the effect on myself is, you have a narrative in your mind. You have like an inner narrator and an inner narrative in your mind. And this method goes about changing that narration, the story that you told yourself and the self that is kind of trapped by that narration. And that is inclusive of thoughts, that is inclusive of your subconscious habits. It is inclusive of your activities. It is inclusive of your circumstance, your job, your family. It basically impacts every area of life, because it is such a critical point. The mind is kind of the origin of everything that we're doing. It is the starting point, and it is also the point where it connects back to, because we look back, and if we're looking back with regret, if we're looking back with, fear, if we're looking back at experiences that may have caused trauma, if we're looking at them with dread, it really restricts the way that we feel about ourselves, and it affects the way that we feel about everything, our world. And just by, going through this process, I was able to experience a real shift. And the last 8 years have basically been, taking it back to formula and reformulating it. We took the same structure that we learned in Korea, and we came here and developed it for a Western palate. A lot of the topics that were covered there, the lifestyle, a lot of things are very different in Korea and the United States. But the mind remains constant. It's the backdrop of all these things. And so we we took the opportunity to review that and create what we hope will be, a really exciting and revealing experience for anybody out there who cares to try it. So that's my story. I don't know if there's any questions out there that I can help with, or I'll just turn it back over to Sheena, and she can take it from here.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for sharing your story.
I also wanted to ask you, Afsana, if there's anything that you wanted to mention from your personal experience.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So I've had the opportunity to work with Sheena. She's been my meditation coach for almost 4 years now. Hard to believe that it's been 4 years already, but I'll share sort of why I started down the path. I was actually I was living in the Bay Area. My family had moved here recently. I was working at a startup. It was very exciting, a thrilling, fast-paced, fast growth startup. Really believed in the mission. However, 2 years into the startup, the situation sort of was changing. There were a lot of organizational changes, and on top of the sort of fast-paced, just kind of results-driven environment of the startup, I was starting to have a lot of internal turmoil. It was very clear that the startup was no longer a good, emotionally supportive environment for me, but I couldn't get myself to leave. I was so attached to the work, the mission, the clients. I just couldn't, I was really struggling to kind of leave. And so that's when I started the meditation. And one, it was helping me sort of deal with the challenging work environment. But two, what it also helped me do through the first 2 levels that Sheena described was it helped me detach from the things I was too attached to in an unhealthy way. My clients, the job, the mission. I wasn't putting myself first. I wasn't putting my long-term health and well-being first. So I was able to detach to a point where I could actually interview and find another role, which really happened within 3 to 6 months of my starting this practice with Sheena, and it ended up being a wonderful thing. I think sometimes we get stuck, and it's important to have a healthy level of detachment to be able to move on. So I think that was one key event. And then since then, I've actually had a couple of other career transitions as well. And the practice has really helped me through that again. And when I practice it on an ongoing basis, I'm trying to always achieve a level of healthy emotional detachment to my work, the results, the thoughts, all of those things. What one thing I'll share is separate from that. Sheena spoke earlier about the daily release. I think I'm one of those people who, again, fairly high intensity, type A, and my mind is always replaying everything, the good things, the bad things, usually the bad things more so than the good things. And this practice of daily release, the weekly release, it's almost a continuous practice of detaching from these things that weigh us down, our thoughts, the things that we just hold on to too long and create an emotional burden in our minds, and then it start to create a physical pain in our body. So that daily release, it helps me process things much faster. I can give another example as a work situation, and somebody had, I don't know, lied to me, deceived me. But what I realized that in a week, I was over it. I was no longer upset with the person. I had just processed it. I had forgiven them. I didn't have any grudges. And that's also a point of realization I had that, wow, I'm actually able to process these things so that they're no longer a burden on me. And that was a huge relief. So now I know when I go through situations, yes, it may cause some perturbation in the near term, but I know that within a few days or a week, I can process it. And another word for that really is resilience. That is an example of how, at least for me personally, maybe different from other people, for other people, I'm able to achieve resilience. And I think for many of us here, as we know, at least what I've seen is, as I get older, as life gets more complicated, as my job has more responsibilities, I mean, I look at the amount of things I need to process in any given day, in any given week. There are a lot of wins, but there are a lot of lows and a lot of falls, and there are just more of them occurring in any given week or day. And it absolutely requires a level of resilience to be able to deal with that and get to the next day and just move on. So I'm very grateful for that skill that I now have that allows me to process things quickly, release things quickly. And it's not that I forget about them, but I'm no longer emotionally impacted by them or burdened by them. So those are some of the skills that I've really learned over time through this practice, particularly after the first couple of levels. Others are acceptance, acceptance of who I am, acceptance of situations, acceptance of things I cannot control. And then with that comes kind of letting go and surrendering. The thing I continue to work on is, again, really finding that higher purpose and aligning myself to what may be my supreme purpose. So I'm continuing to work on that. So long answer to your short question, but it's been a very rewarding journey for me. And so with that, again, I'll invite folks to just offer their own experiences. If there's a certain type of meditation or practice that you've benefited from, please feel free to share that with us. And then there's a question in the chat. I'll read it. Thank you for this question. It's from Scott. The question is the narrator that Ben referred to equivalent to what we call our ego? And if so, what happens to that ego when we become more refined and capable, as Sheena describes? To go deeper, do we transcend the ego? Do we transcend the mind? Or are we just making them healthier in these techniques for the achievement of our usual social goals? Thanks for the question. And I'll let Sheena and Ben answer.
Okay, let's go into this. So yes, I think for all intents and purposes, we can equate that narrator to the same as the ego. And a lot of times, the ego is sometimes untrained. So, early on, the ego tries to sort of sabotage a lot of our attempts. What the meditation does is it brings the ego into alignment with this collective consciousness that we spoke of earlier. And in a way, it's sort of ego training. We don't dispel the ego, we don't get rid of it. It's more a completion process where it's integrated. And eventually we become whole. We become this complete being. We're not fragmented anymore, where we just have this one voice that's just occupying our thoughts and just out of fear or trauma that speaks to us. But we become, aware of our higher self. And so the ego then seeks to assist us in this process. It's no longer working against us. It's now working with us. So that's how the narrator and the voice changes. It's now no longer this scared little being that's speaking, but it's more this empowered, bigger self that speaks. So I wouldn't say that we transcend the ego, but it's more of an integration of the ego into this larger collective consciousness. Does that answer it, Scott? Or
yeah, I mean, it makes sense within what you're describing. And so in some other meditation practices, we transcend the ego to reveal, other inherent qualities of one's being. And so, a little bit curious about the integration process. Certainly I can see how that makes one healthier and more capable in a day-to-day, just managing one's life and so on.
right.
And then this notion of connecting it to the collective, did you say collective consciousness or higher goals? So that's probably a whole other subject that might take a bit to unpack.
That's a whole discussion by itself. But but I'm just lightly touching on it.
Yeah.
But
Understood.
it's very much an integrated process, and it's a
Mhm.
process. It's what we refer to as completion.
Mhm.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Any other questions? Okay.
Good. Well, Sheena, at this point, I'll say, do you have, if you have, we can go back to you if you have any more slides, or if not, I know you wanted to facilitate us through a little exercise. We can do that now.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Let's head into a little bit of practice. So I'm actually going to take you through a very, very edited version, because usually, our sessions span between an hour to an hour and a half, but I'm going to condense that into a short practice. So this is a sped up version of what we usually do, but the initial part is how to at least to get that noise in your mind to kind of relent a little. So we're going to go through a little process of letting go of something that usually causes irritation or reactivity or anger. It can be a person, an event, any situational experience that you had. If you want to just bring that up in your mind, just quickly, just locate it. It could have been in the past week, it could have been in the past month, year, or in the past distant. So if you just want to locate a person, event, situation that causes you a little bit of stress, or maybe more so irritation and anger. So just to give you a couple seconds to just locate that. Okay. I'm hoping people have something to work with. All right. So, this practice doesn't require you to fold your legs or get into any particular posture. As long as you're comfortable and you want to be able to have a little bit of quiet around you, but that's about it. So right now, we're just going to get into a comfortable position wherever you're sitting or standing. Sitting is best. So let's start. What I like to do is, before we start, just notice your body. We can do a body scan. Just find out if there's any way that you flex your muscles or your shoulders, if there's any tension in your shoulder or lower back. So what I do is just loosen up whatever parts of you that you feel like stretching. Just look for tension. Become aware of it. Notice that it's there, and that's it. So a little bit of head, neck, and shoulder is good to start. So now we can just relax. The most important thing is just to have your breathing and airway open. And relax your jaw, your shoulders, and you can now close your eyes. So once your eyes are closed, you're going to be paying attention to your breath. We're going to use the breath to focus us into the moment. Just bring us into this present moment. So we're going to take 3 deep breaths. So breathe in and release. Just paying attention to your breath. Very simple. Breathe in, release. And as you're doing this, your mind's going to start to focus more. And for the last breath, deep breath in and release. And now we're going to bring up, if you can, that memory that causes irritation or anger. Just take a second to see it, describe it in your mind. And it's best to bring it up like a photograph or a picture in your mind. So once you locate it, Just take time to look at it. And remember, we're focusing on anger and irritation, whatever this one event or person or thing is. And we're going to use our imagination. We're going to imagine this picture or event, however it looks in your mind. We're going to imagine that it's going to break up into tiny little dots, like pixels. And all these pixels just collapse. And this image in our mind starts to dissolve and just fall to the bottom. And it can get vacuumed away or blown away. And that image just dissolves and disappears. And now the exercise is to bring up the same image and count your way through it. Bring it up repeatedly, dissolve it repeatedly, and let it go. We're going to do this for at least 12 times. And you're going to see if you notice any change in your emotion to this picture or image. As you bring it up repeatedly in your mind, allow it to dissolve, burn, pixelate, and vanish. And try to notice for yourself when that picture starts to become lighter or blurry, or it doesn't come up at all. Just keep bringing it up. Dissolve and let it go. And try to keep a mental count, if you can, of how many times you're letting it go. Whatever that picture looks like, just feel it dissolving. And as we go through 5 or more times, it might be more difficult to bring up. The intensity might change. We're going to stick with the same image. It might speed up. Just bring it up. Dissolve it. And let it go. We should be hitting around 10 times now. If there's anything else intruding in your mind, any thoughts, you can dissolve those too. You can just assume they're getting vacuumed away. Or just visualize any method your mind accepts. Just have this image just change in your mind. And usually by 12 or 13 times, it should get really blurry. And that's when we know we have sufficiently detached from it. The intensity of the emotion will be different. And that memory would now be changed. So let's do this together. We're gonna do the last release of that particular image. Again, feel it pixelating. Feel all of them falling into a heap. The whole image dissolves in your mind. And it's just blown away. Just flies into the air and it's gone. And now there should be a little bit more quiet in your mind. Just a sense of pause. And here you can just relax, just for a minute, or for as long as you can. Just listen if there's a narrator, if it's quiet, if there are other things coming through. Just watch. Just observe. If not, just relax. There's nothing more to do. Just enjoy the space. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And it's like a mini vacation in a couple minutes. And any feedback, any thoughts, any experiences? Did anyone have a dissolving or a transforming of the emotion behind the picture? Any comments? I guess get thumbs up. Okay.
Thumbs up.
All right, I'm seeing some thumbs go up. Any questions? I'm happy to. Oh, I feel such great relief. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Scott, you wanted to say something? Go ahead.
Okay, so I had a funny one. I'll spare you the details, but I would share them in another context. Of like an MIT professor, how many years ago, said something very mean and negative to me, and kind of was probably influential. And so I actually shifted, and I remembered him, after I picked something else. And then, it was kind of fun, to imagine him pixelating and all that kind of stuff going on. And yet, so here's the real key question. And yet, so, he was pixelated. You could imagine, you could probably substitute pixelated to many other ways of dissolving, right? That would be entertaining for one's mind. But nevertheless, I understand you're dissolving into this kind of just vacuity. But nevertheless, in between that moment of sort of hurt or pain and the present, there have been a whole series of choices that I've made. Maybe we're subtly or overtly influenced from that. And then that's on my side. And on his side, he probably wouldn't recognize me if we bumped into each other in Golden Gate Park. But I would, recognize him because he's quite famous and, all the blah, blah, blah. So what I'm trying to say is there's still a kind of, substantiality there. And so which maybe, and again, it's the first time I've done specifically this focused on a particular event and a person, it has the possibility of resurfacing. And so, right, because of both, the continued existence of, the thoughts, the pattern, and also all the choices that were made in between. So basically, the one breeds more and maybe keeps coming up. And this is why we think of it as habit. And so where do you go? Once you knock them down, you dissolve them, you pixelated them. And then what do you do when tomorrow there he is again,
And guess what? You're right. You're absolutely right. He does pop up again. Right. And then what do you do? It's a cumulative effect. And we've done this with so many people, and it's the same across age, it's the same across all experience. And the mind eventually exhausts itself at every level. We found the same result. After around 50 cycles of review, the mind eventually collapses. And that web that you speak of, that single event is so connected to hundreds and hundreds of other. When that single event collapses, everything collapses with it. So it's not necessary to go and pick out every single event in a linear fashion. This is connected. These are webs of information that are stored in the mind. And if on a spider web, you collapse one part, it has this trigger effect and ripple effect to everything else. So if we go through that, like I spoke of, the deep path, where we're letting go of cycles, and I will explain that in detail in a one-on-one, as we let go 50 to 60 cycles, you will feel the collapse. And Asana has experienced this at the end of levels where there is a time where everything dissolves and you won't be able to bring up that little man anymore in your mind. So it does seem overwhelming because there's so much stored up. But as we unravel those basic events, they're connected to everything else, and you will feel that shift. Asana, you felt that, right, at the end, where there was so much detail at the beginning, and as we get to the end of the levels, it was so sparse because
Yeah,
they
I mean,
let go of.
I remember level 1, 2, and 3, those transitions were very stark. They're very stark. Yeah, and there was a lot of release at those early levels, which was really nice. So I also want to thank you, Scott, for sharing. And then Ivy, Mac, and Stella, you had some nice comments. Would any of you like to share? You don't have to, but.
I cried. Oh, okay.
Wow.
I have an inverse question.
Sure.
This whole idea of forgetting is great and wonderful, and just the release. But in my instance, well, not my husband has PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
and what the PTSD has caused is his inability to to actually access stored memories.
Mm-hmm.
So he's getting a touch of cognitive impairment.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you do the inverse, where you turn off those things causing the PTSD, which is this sounds like a great way to do this, and possibly a wonderful therapeutic treatment for PTSD. But then how do you get the other side back, where you can bring focus back to those things that are still in there, but there's no access points to them?
And that's a beautiful aspect of the mind. It will release what it's ready to use. I'm just gonna mute.
Oh, there's a bit of an echo. Yeah, if somebody
Okay.
could mute.
So we don't force the mind into going to places that it's not ready to access. And we do what we call these sweeps, these recon exercises, where we look over even mundane details that we have stored up. And because it's all connected in this web, when I touch on the string of a mundane or insignificant event, eventually it will start to loosen up the entire level or the layer. And once those layers start to release, the mind is ready to bring up what's deeper or more traumatic. And when it's ready to do that, it will surface naturally. We don't force the process, but we work around all the other details, things that come and go, and we do these recon sweeps. And eventually, by releasing on a daily basis or weekly basis, the mind feels comfortable enough to release the deeper aspects. And that's why we have those 7 levels. So we start at the outer level, we go into the more deeper aspects of the mind so that the mind is comfortable and ready. I hope that answers. Yes, the wider path leads to the deeper path.
Great.
But that's why this is a self-paced, self-confirming method. And your mind will tell you when you're ready to move on further and how much it wants to release.
There's a question from Richard. Sometimes the same particular scene is presented in my brain from multiple angles and it brings up different emotions. Any idea on how to dissolve that?
So we just release them all. So, if it can be sometimes, if I take the topic of, at level 2, we work on family and siblings. And, when I bring up the topic of mother, mother can have 100 different meanings for us. She could be a disciplinarian, she could be a caregiver, she could be so much to us, wearing different hats. And so we go through that process of releasing mother as a topic and everything attached to that. So it doesn't matter how many aspects your mind gives to something. We just take it to the point where it's let go of. And eventually the core reveals itself, and then you let go of that. And your mind comes back to that peaceful state. So how we interpret it, we just look at all the interpretations as images. They're all neutral, and we don't give them a higher or lesser value. We just release them.
Good. Well, thank you for taking us through that exercise. I'll be a little bit sensitive to time. Sheena, did you want to wrap up? And then we'll conclude the event with some announcements, but I'll give you the opportunity to.
Sure. As I said, we can go on and on. So, this is just an introduction of our soft launch, and it's in process, and everyone's welcome to contact me. And, we're offering a complimentary introduction. So I'll put my contact details at the end. On September 7th, we're having the actual launch with the website and more information available. We're also going to possibly launch a kid program, another version called the Unmeditation. These are all the different things we would be interested in launching into from September. If you're interested, please contact us. Here's my email. And back to you, Afsana. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you, Sheena. Thanks for sharing. I thought those testimonials and just, people's experiences were really helpful. Mm-hmm. and learning about the methodology. As I shared, like for me, it's been a multi-year journey, but the impact was pretty rapid early on. And so I definitely rely on it now. So, so excited to have you here. I would like to take the opportunity to mention a couple of things. Again, thank you everybody for sharing your evening with us. One is that on Sunday, August 29th, we have an annual event of the MIT Club of Northern California. And this is the annual event where all the officers and club volunteers and members, it's open to everybody at the club. We talk about our progress to date. And then also we introduce the various track leaders, invite new volunteers and participants, and then also share a bit about the plan for the year ahead and invite others to participate in that planning. So again, it's on Sunday, August 29th at 2 p.m. Pacific. So it's a Sunday afternoon and it's a free event. I don't know the details yet. I suspect it will be virtual, just given the COVID scenario we're in. Maybe it will be hybrid of some sort, but feel free to check it out on the website if you're interested in joining. My next announcement is a very exciting one. We have a new co-chair of this healthcare club. His name is Richard Zhang, and I'd like to introduce Richard. So I think, Richard, if you turn your camera on and your audio on, I will hand it to you. You can introduce yourself and then talk a little bit about your upcoming events, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, handing over to you, Richard.
Okay, thank you, Asana. Hi, everyone. My name's Richard. I just graduated from MIT mathematics, defended PhD a few months ago. So I am a very new alum. And I moved to the Bay Area to work at a venture capital fund called Pear VC. Very interested in healthcare myself, and I'm currently organizing a panel discussion on cell therapy, and I already have one panelist confirmed for the month of September. So once I confirm the panelists, I will broadcast it through the default channels of the club and as well as my personal network. I am also looking into the possibility of organizing the healthcare life science conference. This is a big conference that'll happen in January. Yeah, I'll be recruiting, if I take on that responsibility, I'll be recruiting volunteers. And yeah, if you're interested in organizing or co-organizing, I'd love to get in touch. And I'm going to give you my email in the chat box. And looking forward to meeting all of you. I'll hand it back to you, Asana.
Great, thank you. One question came in, Sheena, for you. Do you and Ben usually work in a group or one-on-one?
We do both.
Great. And Sheena, are you able to type in your email address in the chat?
Yes.
That might be good, just in case anybody missed it on the screen. But
Perfect.
yeah, thank you again. I really appreciate everyone's time. I hope you found the event valuable. And again, if you're interested in speaking more with Sheena or Ben, please feel free to contact them directly. If you'd like to volunteer and become more involved with the club generally or with the healthcare track, please feel free to contact Richard or myself. And specifically for the January healthcare event, which is usually hosted around the JP Morgan conference. It's one of, as Richard said, our biggest healthcare events and one of the biggest events of the club. So it's a great opportunity to get involved, to network, to also influence the topics and the agenda of the conference. So please feel free for that one to contact Richard. So with that, we'll wrap up. Thank you again. Have a great evening and enjoy the rest of the summer before we head into Labor Day. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Sheena. Thanks, Ben. Bye.